This is the second part of the economic systems notes for World History 2. And we left off talking about, we talked about capitalism and socialism in the first video. So if you need to get those, go look at video 1. And then we're left off with communism and talking about Karl Marx. So Karl Marx was a German and a philosopher, essentially, and he believed that economics was the major force of history. So everything in history happened because of economics. The French Revolution happened because the peasants were poor and the economic system was unfair and they were going through a starvation period. So everything relates to economics. He said that society's economic structure was based on class. Okay, and that the class that controls business becomes the ruling class. So anytime someone becomes an owner of a business, they move up into that ruling class. And that the only way to change class structure and to have the ruling class and the lower class is through a revolution. And so class struggle between the rich and the poor and between the business owners and the workers is inevitable, meaning it's bound to happen, it has to happen. So this is Karl Marx. And so Marx talks about two classes, okay? The first class is called the bourgeoisie. This was our French middle class, and you need to know how to spell that. And these are the people who own businesses and were the working, or the ruling class, essentially. And then the second class is called the proletariat. You need to know how to spell that too. And they are the working poor. They're the true productive class, according to Marx, who would seize control of from the bourgeoisie. And then in this revolution of the proletariat, they will eventually create a society where the people own everything. And if there's no private property and no group owning the businesses, then there are no classes, and it's a classless society. So this is the idea behind Marx's beliefs. Now, Marx worked with a friend named Friedrich Engels, and together they wrote two books, the Communist Manifesto and a book later called Das Kapital. And one of the famous quotes is that, "Let the ruling class tremble at a communist revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Working men of all countries unite." What do you think it means by proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains? Think about that. We talked about that in class. Probably the idea of, the proletarians are kind of enslaved by their position as the working poor, and so there's nothing that they can go but up. And so the principal idea of communism, according to Marx, is that from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. And so the idea is that you provide for society what you can, what you're able, and you take from society what you need, and nothing more. So here's a picture of a cover of the Communist Manifesto. Karl Marx's ideas and the communist idea get taken in many different scenarios. The Russian Revolution will take it. There are going to be a couple revolutions in 1848. That are trying to be Russian or trying to be communist and kind of nationalistic as well. So from the Communist Manifesto comes the idea of communism. And communism is a system of government in which the state plans and controls the entire economy. Now in this, a single ruling party holds power. So it's not like you have Democrats and Republicans. It would be like one party controlled and there was no second party. And you have no choice but that one party. Okay, and this group always claims to make progress towards a higher social order in which all goods are equally shared by the people. And then there's going to be no differences between people, and then you have a classless society. Now, according to Marx, it all works through the way that capitalism eventually fails because the proletariat will revolt, the working poor will revolt. Socialism then replaces capitalism, and then the workers all share the profits of the businesses that they all collectively own. And then eventually communism will replace socialism, and the workers will end up controlling the government. Eventually it'll get to the point that the government disappears and it becomes a classless society where there's no government, everyone's working together, everyone's collective, and it's all one big happy utopia, essentially. Now remember that I kind of mentioned this in the first video, that these are economic systems and that they're written out on paper, and a lot of people try to put them into practice, but the way that humans interact with each other will always affect whether they are successful or a failure. So communism works pretty perfectly on paper, the idea that everybody's equal, but in true practice it doesn't really always end up working out. We've never gotten to a government disappearing for a classless society. So remember that, and we're focusing on learning what they are and developing our opinions about them, but not necessarily arguing with each other in class about what our beliefs are about them. It's good to understand each other and not argue about it too much. Okay, so communism here, the I guess, 3 questions that we answered in our notes. How do communist societies decide what goods to create, and who is making the decision? And then how do communist societies decide who gets the goods? So take a second, pause the video and answer them, and then we'll go over these questions at the very end of this video. Now in class, we might have taken some time to read the Communist Manifesto. If you're interested, go online to Blackboard. It's been posted and you can read it through yourself. Think about answering these questions. So the aftermath of Marx, after Marx proposes this idea, in Western Europe, okay, remember all of these economic systems come about because of the bad working conditions during the Industrial Revolution. And so in Western Europe, workers are going to gain rights through the protest and the vote, but they don't end up actually having a full revolution. And we get what we call democratic socialism, where there's public control of some businesses, but there's still a respect for individual values and private enterprise. So in the US, we somewhat have a democratic socialist system where, we're mainly capitalist, but we have some socialist sides to our country or to our government. We have things like Medicaid and Medicare, healthcare for the poor and the elderly. We have Social Security, which is kind of a safety net for the elderly. You pay into it while you work, and then you get payments from it when you retire. So those are socialist systems. You could argue that a public school system is a socialist system because it's the government providing something that a business could provide. I wouldn't go so far as to say public schools are socialist. But you get the idea of how the public is controlling some businesses through the government. Now in Russia in the 1900s, and we'll do a whole section on this later, but there's a revolution where a largely agricultural society, a land of peasants, develops a radical form of socialism called communism. Okay, so they take socialism a step further, and they impose their beliefs on the country, and they don't have democracy. So it eventually becomes a dictatorship. And we'll look at that with our little mini unit on the Russian Revolution, and then talking about Stalin later on and what happens with them. So that's coming, but that's kind of what ends up happening. Now, if you look at the questions that we asked about each of the economic systems, what are some of the differences between capitalism and socialism and communism? Answer them, make sure that you've answered them, and then go ahead and check your answers on this chart, and we'll do this in class as well, just to kind of review before the test. But when you compare them, okay, the basic difference between how they decide what goods and services to create is that capitalism and socialism are based on supply and demand, whereas communism is basically the government says what the people need. And then, so we should add government in here. And then for who decides, in capitalism, it's going to be private business owners and corporations. In socialism, it's the people collectively or a centralized government. And then in communism, it's a single-party government or usually a dictator decides. How are goods and services distributed? It's going to be in capitalism based on who has money to buy it. In socialism, it's all going to be equal, okay? Think about our economic scenario that we did in class and how the group of socialists had to divide up all of their money and candy at the end. And then communism is all based on need, and so the government decides what you need, and that's what you get. So that's the end of our notes. I hope you understand the differences between the 3 economic systems. That's going to be important for understanding the test, as well as knowing the people who are involved. So capitalism, Adam Smith; socialism, Robert Owen; and then communism, Karl Marx. Thanks for watching.